witches, Tiffany here on Bewitching Bemused, if you don't already know me. Today we're going to cover a binding spell. Now, there are lots of different binding spells out there, and when it comes to magic, binding can take place in many forms. Of course, you can bind someone to you, you can bind an object to you, but this in particular is a way of binding someone to get them to stop committing a negative behavior. The reason I wanted to do this video is because I did put out a video on banishing spells, which is linked down below in the description box if that's more kind of what you're looking for. And I've noticed that in a lot of the comments, people are looking to resolve issues that I think would actually be better resolved with a binding spell as opposed to a banishing spell. Now, some people consider a binding spell a more ethical alternative to cursing, while others consider binding spells to be curses because you are taking away somebody's free will. But today we're not talking about ethics, and it's really up to you what you are comfortable with. That might be a little irresponsible of me to say, but I am going to put out a whole video on the ethics of witchcraft in a couple weeks, so hopefully that will cover my ass. I personally consider this a curse light. There are also alternative methods to binding someone, such as a freezer spell or other versions of pretty much the same thing. If you are interested in the freezer spell version, please drop that down in the comments below and I will be more than happy to make that video as well. I just wanted to start off with this particular version because it is one that I have had a lot of success with. And I will give an additional, very similar alternative at the end of this video. Now, before you start, keep in mind that if their will is stronger than your intention, is stronger than your visualization, your emotions, and your focus, you may need to do this more than once. But the good thing is, it doesn't require a lot of ingredients, and the ingredients that are required are not expensive. Let's start with the timing. If you work with the moon phases, I highly recommend that you do this on the dark moon. But what is even more important than that is that you do this spell while you are feeling the emotions that come about as a response to this behavior that you want to stop. It's really best done like pretty fresh after an incident with this person has occurred, and I really encourage you to summon up all those emotions, as negative as they may be and as uncomfortable as it may be for you to continuously feel them. You know, you don't have to dwell on them long term, just long enough to complete this spell. So I want you to start really focusing in, hone in on those emotions from the time you start gathering supplies until the very end of the spell. Now keep in mind, anger is a very, very powerful emotion, both in magic and in mundane life. And while I do encourage you to tap into your anger for this spell, I am going to warn you. If an incident with this person has just occurred and you are furious and the idea to do this spell just dawned on you, you haven't been, considering it for a while, or you haven't tried other alternatives, maybe just sleep on it. You don't have to entirely let that anger go, but I highly encourage you to just cool down enough so you are going into this spell with complete clarity, with absolute rational thinking. You do not want to regret this later, and while you are doing it, you must do it with absolute conviction that you really want to do this spell, that you really want this behavior to stop. That's the thing with anger, is it can make us very impulsive and we can wind up doing a spell that we regret later on. I do talk about that in my video about times when it's not a good time to cast a spell. And I get it, I'm asking you to walk a fine line here. You want to really harness that anger for the spell, but not be so angry that you haven't really thought about the repercussions of your actions. But I encourage you, please do so. Walk that fine line. Just take your moment, take a breather. And if you still want to go through with the spell, then hell yes, harness that anger. Time for the ingredients. First of all, you are going to need black thread or black string, black ribbon, or black yarn. Next up, you need a picture of the person. Now, first of all, please make sure it's not a group picture. If it's a group picture, cut the other people out. Make sure nobody else is in the photo. It also needs to be a relatively recent picture because it is them currently committing these actions, you know, displaying this behavior that you want to stop. You also want to make sure the picture looks as much like them as possible. So, you know, no pictures from a Halloween party where they're in costume. No pictures of them with a Snapchat filter on. You'll need a pen or a marker, preferably in black ink, and a pair of scissors. So like I said, while you're gathering these supplies, you want to already be feeling that anger. Like if you're just like opening the drawer and slamming it shut when you pull out the scissors, good. Like don't break anything, but good. Next, when you print off the picture, you don't want like a massive, you know, 8x11 or anything crazy like that. I'm just gonna use this piece of paper as an example. So it can just be like this size. It can be a little bit smaller. You don't want it like an eensy beensy little thing. You can just print it off your computer right onto printer paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And after you do that, the first thing you're gonna do is take your pen. I'm just gonna go ahead and use this as an example. There's like a moon on the other side. So we'll just say that's a person's head. Put little eyeballs. And I'm just gonna make a stick figure because I don't really have anybody to curse right now, and if I did, I wouldn't talk about it on the internet. Okay, so this is my little person. Hopefully it's focused on the camera. It's printed off. Next thing you're going to do is write their full name across the back of it right at the top. So I'm just going to write John, if I can spell, Doe. John Doe is my guy's name. Just right there, right at the top. Now, if this person has changed their name during their life at any point, it does not need to be their birth name. It needs to be their current name. Like I said earlier, it wasn't their past selves affecting you. I mean, it might have been, but it's their present selves affecting you right now. So we've got that with their name, and we're like writing their name. We're still angry. We're feeling all the emotions that come with the effects of their actions. Okay, sorry, I had to adjust my lighting because it's getting darker outside and then my camera got moved, so. Anyway, next up, you are going to take this picture and you're going to look at it. Just take it in both hands and look at it. And I want you to think back on memories of times, both recent and in the past, that they have done this behavior and it has impacted you negatively. Feel all of the negative emotions that have resulted from their actions, whether that's disgust, anger, sadness, you know, hurt, annoyance, desperation. Push all of those negative feelings into this picture. Then talk to the picture. Talk to them as if they are sitting right in front of you and you are getting the chance to say everything that you want to say about their behavior, but face no repercussions. You know, usually we can't tell people all the things that we're thinking and feeling because there are repercussions. So imagine that there are none, that you get to say whatever you want to say to them. And I want you to do it. Say their name out loud. Say, you know, John Doe, you have done this. It resulted in this. It made me feel this way. After you've gone through all that, go back to the back of the picture and I want you to pretty much write all of that down. You don't have to direct it to them, say you have done this, you have done that, but I want you to write down what they're doing, the behavior that you need to stop. How is it affecting you? How does it make you feel? Why do you want it to stop? Write down as much as you can on the back of the picture. And if it gets cut off, that's okay. If you're just like so angry that you're just like, and you fill up the whole thing, perfect. Again, the most important part of this is the process of putting the emotions into the work. and just continuously call upon those memories, those recent and previous incidences that just really bothered you, that really affected you. Or if it was an incident that you weren't present for, that you heard about secondhand and it enraged you, think about that. Imagine how it went down, because we all do that naturally. Like if somebody tells us, oh, so-and-so is telling this rumor about you behind your back, like we think about it, right? Even if it's not exactly how it went down, we consider like, who did they tell? How did they tell them? What exactly did they say? So do that. And again, speak it aloud as you write it down. Now, if you can't be super loud about it because other people are at home or whatever the case is, you know, you can whisper it, but you can whisper with an intense urgency and an intense hatred, you know, like, oh, I'm so fucking mad right now. You know, you can whisper and still have that same intensity as you would if you were yelling at the top of your lungs. So if I was doing this, let's say John Doe, I would say, John Doe, his name is on there. So John Doe is stealing my ideas at work. He is using me to make himself look good and ruining my chances for a promotion and for a raise. He makes me feel small. He makes me feel frustrated, furious, helpless, stuck in my current situation. Other people think that I never have ideas or that I don't contribute. I'm never rewarded for the wonderful ideas I have because John Doe is stealing them. So I would just write as much and just keep going, just keep going. Most likely, if this situation, if this person's behavior is upsetting enough that you are willing to do this spell, you should have more than enough to write down. Even if it's you just like listing out, you know, writing like one behavior that they do, list out every single time that particular behavior has affected you. Write out all of the emotions that go with it. So after that, you are going to sign the paper. You do not need to leave room for this. You are just going to sign right over it. So what I do is I take it and I turn it counterclockwise so it is diagonal. Now I've heard of some people saying they, you know, turn it all the way to the side or they turn it upside down. Personally, I just like it a little bit crooked. Sign your full name across it. Now, the reason for this is because you are committed to this. You are literally signing your name on it. You want this to happen. You are that determined to do this, then sign it. Once you've done that, you are just about good to go. You are going to fold it in half. Now, personally, when I'm holding it facing myself, I like to fold it away, always with things like cursing, banishing. It's away. So the bottom half upward because that's going away from me. Lena and I are interrupting really fast to say, if you're enjoying this video so far, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me out a lot. And consider subscribing if you are brand new here, because we'd love to have you stick around. And if you're looking for more ways to support my channel and get maybe a little bit of extra content, go ahead and check out my Patreon at patreon.com/bewitching.bemused. Lena does not look very interested in this video. After that, I'm going to turn it again, counterclockwise just once, and then begin rolling it up. Now, it doesn't have to be like a perfect cylinder. It's okay if it's like a little mashed and flat. Honestly, that makes it a little bit easier to work with if you do kind of flatten it, but make sure you're rolling it from the bottom up, because once again, you are rolling it away from yourself, not towards yourself. This is not something you're bringing in, it's something that you are sending away. You are stopping, like so. Okay, so this one sort of, it's a little crooked. It's not perfect, that's totally fine. After that, take your thread. Now I just use basic black sewing thread. Again, like I said earlier, it's whatever will work to tie around this, because you are literally going to be binding this picture. I personally leave it connected to the spool. That way I can use as much as my heart desires. I kind of go for as long as you want to make sure the whole thing is covered, but I just continue to go until it feels right to stop. So I can't tell you like, oh, you need 2 feet of thread, because that's not necessarily always going to be accurate. So I recommend leaving it connected. I'm just gonna put it right down there. I like to pinch it on the outside, like hold it in place there, because I want to wrap away from myself. Again, it's always away. And this does not need to be neat. It does not need to be this pretty uniform. And in fact, just like I said earlier, you should be in such a state of like, that it really, like, if you're able to make it look neat, I don't know if you're angry enough for this. Well, I guess some people work even better under pressure. So anyway, you're just gonna start wrapping it. Start wrapping it. And I want you, again, to talk aloud. Say their name out loud. Say that you are binding them and tell them why. Say what you're binding. John Doe, I bind you so you can no longer limit me at work. I bind you so you will stop stealing my ideas. John Doe, I bind you. I prevent you from going to our boss and claiming my ideas are your own. John Doe, I bind you. You just kind of keep going with it. And if you work up to a frenzy and you're just like, you know, just improvise. You can write something down if you want, like have a written list. If you're one of those people that you don't really feel prepared kind of improvising what you're saying during a spell, that's fine. Have a written list of all the things that they've done, all the ways that it's affected you, all the ways it's made you feel. The most important words in this are the person's name and I bind you. And yes, it's okay to allow yourself to get a little worked up. Again, the emotions going into this need to be very, very strong because you are affecting somebody else's willpower. So I would just keep going with this. Once I have it pretty solid, I'm gonna keep going just so I can show you guys what I mean. Like, this is a good amount right here. But again, you keep going for as long as you feel is necessary until you feel like it is fully charged up, like the job is done. Just use your intuition with it, whenever it feels right. Once it's ready, I just pinch that end really tight and I cut off a length of thread. And now I'm going to tie it. I go ahead and double knot it. If you do knot magic, you can work that in here. Personally, I don't work with knot magic very much, so I'm not going to incorporate that into this tutorial just because I haven't done that when I've done this spell myself. I just like to double knot it because you want to make sure it's secure. If you want to knot it a certain number of times, that's completely up to you. You can absolutely personalize this spell. And with my final knot, I always say my little sign off. Mine is, as I will it, so shall it be. Whatever yours is, blessed be, there it is, voila, and so it is, you know, whatever, go ahead and say your little sign off. If you have one, not everybody has one, of course, but whatever you do to sort of signify that a spell is done, do that or say that. The spell is done. At this point, you can go ahead and release those negative emotions. I highly recommend that you do some sort of grounding, meditation, perhaps a cleansing ritual bath. Just, you know, you don't want to continue to dwell on these emotions. It's not necessary at this point. So at this point, let those go. Don't continue to damage yourself for the sake of binding this other person, for, you know, preventing them from doing something. Because if you're going to continue to allow what they've done previously to affect you now, they may as well keep doing the same behavior, right? So don't punish yourself further. They've already done it enough, and hopefully you have figured it out, you've handled it, you've handled business. But this thing right here, you are now going to store this in a very dark place. Do not throw it away. One, because you don't know where it's gonna end up. You want it to keep working. You want to keep it in a dark place. I don't care where, as long as you know where it is at all times, because you don't want to lose it. Because the other thing is, if you ever need to undo this, you're gonna want the original item. So if it comes down to it and you ever do need to undo it, whether because you know, they learn their lesson and you feel like they've kind of grown from the experience and they don't need it anymore, or because you regret your choices, all you have to do is take it back out, you know, and you can unbind it and say, I unbind you, kind of do the whole thing in reverse, or you can just toss the whole thing into a fire. I go into more detail of how to do that in my video on undoing spells, so I highly suggest you check that out. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to offer you another alternative version of the spell in which you are going to get very, very specific and use a poppet of the person. Now, this is a poppet that I made of myself, so I'm definitely not gonna demonstrate on her, because, yeah. Honestly, I don't have a video on making poppets. I kind of wish I did before I covered this. But I will say, to keep it simple, I'm gonna send you out to Google it yourself, but try to get it to look as much like the person as possible. Admittedly, she doesn't look very much like me. And if you can, use a tag lock. Sew a piece of their hair, fingernails, and tuck those inside of it. Then tell that poppet who they are. Again, there's a little bit more to it than that. I'm not trying to simplify it. That's just sort of a broad explanation, but if you want to make a poppet, please go out and do the research on how to make it. Someday, when I make that video, I'll link it right up there and in the description box below. You would essentially do the same thing to the poppet that you were doing to the picture, except this time you're not going to write anything down. You don't need a picture of them, and you don't need to write their name down because you have already told the poppet who they are, and hopefully you have a tag lock in there as well, because then you have like a DNA link of who this person is. Say this person is gossiping about you. You can wrap the thread around their mouth. Say it's a creepy boss who keeps touching you inappropriately at work. You know, take their hands, bind their hands together. If they're cheating on you, bind their pelvis, bind their genitals. I think you get the general idea. Anyway, that would function with the exact same steps as the previous spell using the picture. It's just, you know, you're gonna trade out the picture for the poppet. Wait, no, you're gonna trade out the poppet for the picture. But that's just one alternative way to do this. Anyway, witches, that's it for today. I hope this was a very useful video, and I hope you're all going to use this information wisely before I send you out into the world with this spell. Thank you all for tuning in today. I'll see you next time, but in the meantime, stay magical.